And we are back. Yes, Get Legit LLC. We're back, and today we will be having a discussion as it relates to the monarchy in Britain. Let's get into it, okay? As usual, here is our disclaimer. Whatever copyrighted materials we're using, it's solely for educational purposes. We mean nothing bad by it. And for those of you who haven't yet subscribed, I don't know why not. Could you please subscribe to my channel? I'm growing. Every day I wake up and I see a new subscription. I'm like, yes, yes. But I need to reach to 1,000 at least so I could start to monetize these work that I put out and these videos. It takes a lot of time, as most YouTubers will know, but hey, we're all learning here. Okay, so please hit that like button, comment, share, and please do subscribe. And to all those who have already subscribed to my channel, thank you. Thank you. So as you can see, I want to know, I'm asking the question. I want to know if the new king who will be crowned May 6, 2023, if he's going to apologize to us for the atrocities of slavery. Anyway, so May 6, 2023, King Charles III will be crowned. And so that has, put me in a position of questioning whether or not there will be any changes as it relates to, will he be the king that apologizes to Black people of African heritage for the atrocities of slavery? I mean, I know the Dutch Prime Minister apologized, but will they apologize? I come from a country, and that country that I come from, we still have the Queen's head on our money. Imagine that. 2023, yes. And we gained our independence from them in 1981. Yes. And so, and we did, we had slavery in Belize as well. Yes. It might not have been the kind of slavery that you would find in the cane fields, in the tobacco, in the cotton fields. No. Our form of slavery was one where they equipped the slaves with weapons because they go off into the forest and they cut down logwood and mahogany. Yeah. So if, for those of you who probably visited any big established buildings in England, in those places, you could very well be touching and seeing mahogany that were spirited away from my country, Belize. Yeah. So it goes. Anyway, I want to get into a historical discussion as it relates to slavery. What was the British, the monarchy's role when it comes to slavery? And so to that end, I will have to do a quick historical discussion into their role, and other videos I intend to do will then look at their apologizing, if they will apologize, and should they apologize, and reparations, and all those good topics that a lot of people are now looking at, discussing, and so on. So for those of you who are interested, King Charles III will be coronated on, his coronation will be May 6, 2023. And it's a long-standing tradition. It will be taking place at Westminster's Abbey. I've just read an article where I see the President of the United States will not be attending. However, his wife will attend on behalf of the United States of America. For you all people. Yes. Let's get into it. What role did the British play when it comes to the monarchy, I should say, played when it comes to slavery? Okay, it says here, and it's a document I'm reading that came from Toby Thomas. He's the writer from The Guardian, and it's entitled, "While it is difficult to say how much of the royal family's wealth is owed to the slave trade. The past links date back to the 16th century. So the 16th century, at that time, the queen was Queen Elizabeth I. For those of you who don't know, Queen Elizabeth I was the daughter of Henry VIII, and she would have been the daughter with Henry VIII and her mother, Anne Boleyn, the infamous Anne Boleyn. For those of you who don't know, Henry VIII was married to Catherine of Aragon, and Catherine of Aragon was married to Henry VIII's brother. The brother died. Henry VIII married her, and she was a queen. Then he sets his eyes on Anne Boleyn and pursued Anne Boleyn for, I believe, 10 years or over 10 years. They eventually got married. However, in order for Henry VIII to marry Anne Boleyn, he had to first break away with the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And yeah, and to that end, a lot of people were beheaded, yes. And it threw the whole country into a conflict. And then we had a Queen Anne Boleyn. She gave birth to a child. And her child was a girl. Henry VIII wanted a boy to succeed him. And so eventually, over a period of time, based on allegations, Anne Boleyn she was beheaded. Then he married someone else. And so the story goes. But Queen Elizabeth I is credited with a lot of the Renaissance era in England, a lot of Reformation and changes and the peak of arts and different things. However, she's also credited with the Queen who commissioned John Hawkins and supported him and provided for him to go on his slave escapades, if I should say so. So let me read, okay? The royal family's link date back to the 16th century. In 1562, John Hawkins was the first known English person to include enslaved Africans in his cargo, a journey that was approved by Elizabeth I. The enslaved Africans were traded for goods, including ginger and sugar. In 1564, Hawkins arranged another voyage for which Elizabeth I funded a vessel. In 1660, the Royal African Company was established by the Duke of York, who later became James II, with involvement from his brother, Charles II. The Royal African Company was prolific within the slave trade. According to the Slave Voyages website, between 1672 and 1731, the Royal African Company transported more than 187,000 slaves from Africa to English colonies in North, Central, and South America. Where I come from Central America. That's Belize, smack in the middle. Anyway, many of the enslaved Africans transported by the Royal African Company were branded, DY, standing for Duke of York. So let me get into it more. Between 1690 and 1807, an estimated 6 million enslaved Africans were transported from West Africa to the Americas on British or Anglo-American ships. The slave trade protected by the royal family and parliament. It was protected by the royal family and parliament. It is difficult to estimate just how much of the current royal family's wealth is owed to slavery, but it is understood that the profits of the slave trade funded the treasury as well as Britain's industries, buildings, railways, roads, and parks. According to Professor Corinne Fowler, an academic at the University of Leicester, who specializes in Britain's colonial legacies, the royal family, quote, open quotes, has an opportunity to show leadership by acknowledging its involvement, making a formal apology and asking openly and humbly what the family can do to begin to repair the damage, close quotes. And as first step to moving on open quotes, might be to decide that the queen should no longer be ceremonial head of state. And by this, it will mean not the queen anymore because she has passed. However, the king, ceremonial head of state. For those of you who don't know, ceremonial head of state, in the country I come from, Belize, the king is a ceremonial head of state. He is the head. And in other countries, Barbados just removed the monarchy as their head of state. I believe that was last year. And so it's a matter of time to see. I believe Antigua and Barbuda, they have made moves to do the same, but I don't know where they're at with that as yet, but I'll have to do some research and then get back to you guys and let you know. So, yeah, this lady, not so flattering looking lady. Yeah, that's the Queen Elizabeth I, and she was the first monarch to endorse the slave trade when she supported John Hawkins' slaving expeditions of 1560s. Hawkins sold his African to Spanish Caribbean in defiance of the Portugal's dominance over the European slave trade. Queen Elizabeth even honored him after his profitable second voyage by giving him a coat of arms and a crest featuring a nude African bound with rope. During the reign of King Charles II from 1660 to 1685, the Crown and members of the royal family invested heavily in the African slave trade, seeking to bolster the wealth and power of the restored monarchy and to supplant the Dutch in the Atlantic trading system. Charles granted a charter to the Company of Royal Adventurers into Africa, a private joint stock company, less than 6 months after ascending the throne. The charter gave the Royal Adventurers a 1,000-year monopoly over trade, land, and adjacent islands along the west coast of Africa, stretching from what was then known as the Cape Blanco, which is the Western Sahara, in the north of the Cape of Good Hope in the south. The king lent the company a number of royal ships, including a vessel called the Blackamoor, and reserved for himself the right to 2/3 of the value of any gold mines discovered. By the time King Charles II granted a charter to the recognized Royal African Company of England in 1672, the demand for slave labor in Americas had intensified, ensuring a steady supply of African captives to the England's Caribbean and North American colonies promised not only to generate profits for shareholders and the crown, but also to expand England's imperial footprint in the Atlantic world. As English planters in the Atlantic colonies clamored for more enslaved Africans, English enslavers profited and the African slave trade expanded. The Royal African Company of England, notes historian William Pettigrew, shipped more enslaved African women, men, and children to the Americas than any other single institution during the entire period of the transatlantic slave trade. The company's seal captures how English enslavers, with crown encouragement, eagerly harness the lives and bodies of Africans to generate commercial wealth and build an overseas empire. The seal shows an elephant bearing a castle flanked by 2 enslaved African men. From its founding in the 1672 to 1688, James, the Duke of York, the future King James II, served as the governor of the Royal African Company and its largest shareholder. James also held the position of Lord High Admiral, which enabled him to exercise punitive power over anyone who challenged the company's monopoly in West Africa or English colonies. So, intimately intertwined was the English monarchy with the slave trade, and the company left a permanent mark of royal ownership on the bodies of enslaved. Before their departure for the Americas, Africans, captives, were branded on the right shoulder or breast with the letters D.Y. for the Duke of York, or R.A.C.E. for the Royal African Company of England. In 1698, Parliament opened the slave trade to all English traders. Independent traders were required to pay a 10% duty to the Royal African Company to help maintain its African forts. When this act expired in 1712, an official era of free trade began. Imagine that. Millions of Africans were captured, torn from their families, forcibly transported across the Atlantic, sold to the highest bidders, and subjected to physical, psychological, and sexual violence by their enslavers. During the peak years of the Atlantic slave trade, between 1690 and 1807, European enslavers carried approximately 6 million enslaved Africans to the Americas. Almost half of these captives arrived in British or Anglo-American ships. Protected by the Crown and Parliament, the slave trade became one of Britain's most profitable industries. The production of popular labor-intensive agricultural products such as sugar, tobacco, cotton, and coffee in the Atlantic colonies hinged on the regular supply of African captives. The vast majority of enslaved Africans, men, women, and children, were destined for the sugar fields of Brazil and the Caribbean islands. As the British Atlantic Empire became more reliant on the labor of enslaved Africans, critics of the slave trade and colonial slavery were marginalized or diminished as radicals. Meanwhile, enslaved men and women took matters into their own hands, struggling against slavery and racist colonial regimes from below. By running away, refusing to work, feigning illness, and rebelling collectively over and over again, enslaved Africans and their descendants made it clear that their lives mattered. Some people of African descent who gained their liberty joined the transnational abolitionist movement and made both anti-slavery and anti-racism central to their mission. During the lengthy reign of King George III from 1760 to 1820, Atlantic slave uprising and a multiracial coalition of abolitionists transformed the British public's view of the slave trade. At the same time, the Crown supported its continuation. The pro-slavery views of the king and his sons bolstered the efforts of the London Society of West Indian planters and merchants to delay the abolition of the British slave trade for nearly 2 decades. George's third son, Prince William, the future King William IV, served as the Royal Navy as a teenager and was the first member of the royal family to visit Britain's North American and Caribbean colonies. While stationed in Jamaica, William witnessed colonial slavery firsthand and approved of what he saw. In 1799, William, now Duke of Clarence, delivered his maiden speech in the House of Lords against the abolition of the slave trade. Printed by the pro-slavery lobby and widely circulated, his speech was viewed by many Britons as representative of the attitudes of the royal family. But not all members of the royal family supported the slave trade. George's nephew and son-in-law, Prince William Frederick, Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh, allied with the abolitionists in Parliament and became a vocal anti-slavery supporter. After the British Parliament outlawed slave trade in 1807, Frederick served as the first president of the African Institution, an abolitionist organization founded to enforce the Abolition Act and promote civilization and improvement in Africa. William Frederick worked closely with leading English abolitionists such as Thomas Clarkson and William Wilberforce. to influence the major European powers to follow Britain's lead and abolish slave trade. Although the Slave Trade Act of 1807 had made it illegal for British subjects to buy or sell African captives, demands for slaves remained high in the Caribbean, Brazil, and the Spanish colonies, and the United States. Not forget the United States. After 1808, as the illegal slave trade flourished, European enslavers transported millions of enslaved Africans to the Americas, many in ships built, financed, or outfitted in Britain. In the decades after abolition of the British slave trade, enslaved and free people of African descent petitioned the Crown repeatedly, seeking royal intervention on their behalf in their quest for liberty and civil rights. These petitions largely fell on deaf ears. Even after Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which ended slavery in the British Caribbean, Mauritius, and the Cape Colony, that's South Africa. Enslaved people did not immediately receive their freedoms, though, same as in Belize. The negotiated settlement required enslaved men and women to continue to labor for their former master as unpaid apprentices, and also granted £20 million in compensation to Britons with financial interests in slavery. Formerly enslaved people and their descendants received nothing other than recognition of their status as free subjects of the British sovereign. After 1838, with both slavery and apprenticeship system at an end in Britain's Atlantic Empire, the British monarchy publicly supported the anti-slavery cause for the first time. In May 1840, Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband, accepted an invitation to serve as the president of the Society for the Extinction of the Slave Trade and for the Civilization of Africa. A month later, he delivered a brief opening speech at the first International Anti-Slavery Convention held in London. According to eyewitness accounts, when the prince appeared on stage, the crowd of 5,000 or 6,000 people cheered wildly. His remarks could barely be heard above the tumult. Everyone seemed to link with his presence and feelings, those of Her Amiable Majesty the Queen, Thomas Clarkson later recalled, and received him as though, independent of his own professions, he was conveying the feelings and sympathies of Her much-loved Majesty to her loyal and humane subjects. Yeah. Victoria's relationship with Sarah and Abdul, romanticized respectively in the PBS series Victoria and the film Victoria and Abdul, offers examples of how, since the 19th century, the British Crown has sought to rehabilitate its reputation by distancing itself from slavery and racial prejudice. A rehabilitation that Prince Harry's marriage to the Black American actress Meghan Markle in 2018 has since tested. In recent days, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have argued that, in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, it's time for Britain to address its uncomfortable past. But the British monarchy continues to refuse to recognize its historic ties to the slave trade and racial oppression. Will they apologize for the atrocities of slavery? Contemporary members of the British royal family, including Prince William Harry's brother and the heir of the throne, have expressed sadness about their links to the slave trade, but none has ever apologized for the direct role their ancestors played. The appalling atrocity of slaver forever stains our history, William said on a visit to Jamaica last year. I want to express my profound sadness. I have a picture of Prince Harry here, but really and truly I wanted to deal with his comment he made in his book, where he said, the reason why this is explanation as to why William didn't go further. And this is what they're saying. The reason why he doesn't go further is that he's aware of what it will mean to actually apologize in terms of the legal obligation to make reparations suggested to make reparations. Yeah, they always think about their money. Historian says it's impossible to calculate exactly how much wealth the monarchy generated from trafficking human beings. But when William and Kate visited Jamaica last year, they were met by protests demanding not just an apology, but reparations. And there was also protest in Belize. There was protest in Belize. The Maya community protested as it relates to their ownership of the land where they were supposedly to visit or to land their plane. It says here the reason why, okay, this is a repetition. Oh, I have a repetition. I do believe, yes, there is a comment in the Harry's book, Despair, where he talks about slavery. I think this is a quotation from him. The appalling atrocity of slave forever stains our history, William said on a visit to Jamaica. No, that's what William says. Prince Harry made a comment in his book. I will need to find that. I do have a copy of the book on my phone, and so I will research it. And in my next video, I will accurately report on what he said in his book, Despair. Okay. Until next time, thank you all for joining me. Please do comment. Let's have this discussion, especially seeing that May 6, 2023 is right around the bend, that King Charles III will be coronated along with his wife. So let's have a discussion. Let's discuss these things because it affects all of us. It affects all of us. And perhaps maybe he's going to apologize. Maybe at his coronation, he will use that moment to atone. Maybe he's going to use that as a moment to say, hey, sorry, we're sorry, and maybe discuss reparation and make signal they start, putting things in order for reparation. I mean, the Prime Minister, Dutch Prime Minister has started that. Dutch Prime Minister had apologized. It's a start. It's not reparation though, but it's a start. We'll take that. Anyway, until next time. Thank you all for joining me. Please do subscribe to my channel if you like the content. I make a promise to always bring content on a daily basis on these burning topics that is so important for us to discuss and have an appreciation for. So until next time, thank you and goodbye.